The patient in room 312 knew my name. Every hospital has that one floor people avoid talking about. At St. Mary's, it was the 3rd floor. Officially, it was just an older wing waiting to be renovated. A few unused rooms, some storage, a couple of long-term patients no one wanted to move. Unofficially, it was where the night staff told each other not to go alone. I didn't believe any of that. Not until the night a patient I had never met whispered my name before I introduced myself. My name is Claire. And 2 years ago, I started working nights as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. I was 27, exhausted all the time, and trying to prove I could handle the hardest shift in the building. Night shift changes you. The hospital feels less like a place of healing and more like a machine that never sleeps. The lights are dimmer, the hallways are quieter. Every little sound feels louder than it should. The first strange thing happened during my 3rd week. I was covering for another nurse who called in sick, which meant I had to do vitals on a patient in room 312. I remember checking the chart at the desk and noticing there wasn't much information. Male, mid-50s, admitted 3 days earlier. No visitors, no special notes, just observation. That was odd on its own. Charts are never that empty. But I was busy and tired, so I grabbed my clipboard and headed upstairs. The 3rd floor was colder than the rest of the hospital. Not just a little chilly. Cold in that unnatural way, where it feels like the air conditioning is aimed directly at your bones. The hallway lights flickered as I walked toward 312. Not dramatically, just enough to make the corridor feel alive in the worst possible way. When I reached the door, it was already slightly open. I knocked anyway. No answer. So I stepped inside. The room was dark, except for the pale green glow of the monitor. The patient was lying perfectly still, facing the window. At first, I thought he was asleep. Then he spoke. "Claire!" I froze. His voice was low and dry, like he hadn't used it in years. I looked down at my badge instinctively, but it was turned inward against my scrub top. He shouldn't have been able to read it. I forced a smile. "Good evening, sir. I'm just here to check your vitals." He didn't turn around. "You shouldn't be here tonight," he said. Every nurse learns to deal with strange patients. Medication, confusion, fear, dementia. There's always an explanation. That's what I told myself. I stepped closer to the bed. "Let's get your blood pressure." This time he slowly turned his head toward me. I still remember his face. Not because it was disfigured or horrifying. It wasn't. It was because of his expression. He looked terrified. Not of me. For me. Then he said, very quietly, "If the woman in the red coat asks for you, don't follow her." I actually laughed, a nervous reflex. "There's no woman in a red coat here." He stared at me for a few seconds, then whispered, "There will be." I finished the vitals as quickly as I could and left. His pulse was normal, blood pressure normal, temperature normal. Everything about him was normal, except for the way he looked at me. Back at the desk, I asked one of the older nurses about room 312. She stopped typing and looked at me. Why? He was just being strange. What did he say? I hesitated. He knew my name. Her face changed a little. Not surprise, more like irritation. Don't spend too much time in there, she said. That was it. No explanation. Just that. Around 2:15 a.m., I was restocking supplies when the elevator dinged at the end of the hallway. I looked up and saw a woman step out. She was wearing a red coat. Not bright red. Dark red. The kind of coat that looked expensive and too formal for a hospital at 2 a.m. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and she moved with that unsettling calm some people have when they know they don't belong somewhere but expect no one to stop them. I walked toward her. Ma'am, visiting hours are over? She turned and smiled at me. I'm here for the patient in 312. Something in my stomach tightened. The patient's words came back so clearly, it felt like he was standing behind me. If the woman in the red coat asks for you, don't follow her. I tried to keep my voice steady. I'm sorry, but there are no visitors allowed right now. She kept smiling. He asked for Claire. My mouth went dry. How do you know my name? She ignored the question. Instead, she tilted her head and said, He wants to tell you what happened in the basement. I had never been in the hospital basement. At least, not that I remembered. By then, every instinct in me was screaming that something was wrong. I should have called security immediately. Instead, I made the stupidest choice possible. I turned to glance toward the nurse's station for just 1 second. When I look back, she was gone. Not walking away. Gone. The hallway was empty. I searched the floor, stairwell, waiting room, supply closet. Nothing. No one in a red coat. When I went back to the desk and asked if anyone had seen her, the older nurse looked at me like I'd said something offensive. Then she asked, Did you go with her? I said no. She let out a breath and stood up so quickly her chair rolled backward. Come with me, she said. She led me into a small staff room and shut the door. Then she told me something I still think about all the time. A year earlier, another nurse on nights had been assigned to 312. Her name was Jenna. Same age as me, same shift. She told staff she'd seen a woman in a red coat asking questions about one of the patients. Everyone assumed it was stress. 3 nights later, Jenna disappeared. Not quit, not transferred, disappeared. Her locker was still full. Her car was still in the employee garage. Her phone was found in a supply room near the basement stairs. The hospital kept it quiet. Security footage from that night showed Jenna walking down the basement corridor alone. Then the feed cut out for 7 minutes. When it came back, the hallway was empty. No Jenna, no one else. As I stared at the older nurse. Why is that patient still here? She looked toward the door before answering. Because he was there the night she vanished. What? He was brought in unconscious near the basement loading dock 2 hours later. No ID, no records, no explanation. I felt cold all over. What did he tell the police? He said he didn't remember. Of course he didn't. I left the room feeling like the floor beneath me wasn't stable anymore. At 3:07 a.m., the call light for room 312 turned on. No one else would go. So I went. He was sitting upright when I entered, which startled me because he looked too weak to move that much before. "You saw her," he said. I didn't answer. "She comes when someone gets too close." "Too close to what?" He looked at the door, then the ceiling, then finally at me. "There is no patient file because I'm not supposed to exist." I almost walked out right then. Instead, I said, "Who are you?" He swallowed hard. "I was security." That made me stop. A year ago, I found something in the basement. Old surgical records, restricted records, procedures that were never supposed to happen. I felt my pulse pounding in my throat. What procedures? "Memory trials," he said. "On terminal patients, on psychiatric holds, on people with no families. Experimental sedation, induced confusion, identity suppression." I stared at him. He continued, voice shaking now. "Someone found out I'd copied the files. I tried to leave with the evidence. I never made it out." "What happened?" "I woke up here 3 days later with a new chart and a new name." The room suddenly felt too small. "And the woman?" For the first time, real fear crossed his face. "She's not a visitor." Before I could ask another question, every light in the room went out. The monitor died. The hallway outside went black. A full power drop. For 3 seconds, there was nothing but darkness. Then the emergency lights kicked in, bathing the room in deep red. And in that red light, I saw someone standing in the doorway. The woman in the red coat. She wasn't smiling anymore. The patient made a choking sound and grabbed my wrist so hard it hurt. "Run," he whispered. I didn't think. I ran. Down the corridor, past the nurse's station, toward the stairwell. Behind me I heard footsteps, slow and measured, not hurrying because whoever it was knew I had nowhere to go. I made it to the basement door without meaning to. I didn't even realize where I was headed until I saw the sign. B! Restricted access! The door was already open. Inside, the corridor was lit by a few weak emergency lights. At the far end was a records room with the door ajar. And from somewhere behind me, that woman's voice said, almost gently, "Claire, you've already been down here before." I turned. She was standing at the top of the corridor, perfectly still. Then she said the one sentence that made my blood run cold. "You just don't remember!" I backed into the records room and slammed the door. There were cabinets, old files, and one desktop computer still running on backup power. On the desk was a folder with my name on it. Not Claire Reynolds, RN, just Claire. Inside were intake forms, observation notes, medication logs, dates from 6 months earlier. According to those files, I had been admitted overnight after an incident in the basement. Condition: acute panic, disorientation, partial memory disruption. Discharge recommendation: return to duty with no recollection of event. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the pages. At the bottom of the folder was a grainy still image from a security camera. It showed me, standing in this same records room, and next to me was Jenna, the missing nurse, alive, looking directly into the camera. Behind us, blurred but visible, was the woman in the red coat. Then the computer screen flickered and opened to a single video file. I clicked it. It was Jenna, recorded on a phone. Her face was bruised, and she was whispering, "If anyone finds this, don't trust hospital administration. They're covering it up. Claire helped me find the records. If she doesn't remember, they erased it. The man in 312 tried to protect us. If I disappear, it means they know." The video ended. The room went silent. Then I heard the door handle move. Once, twice. Slowly, I grabbed Jenna's video file, my folder, and everything I could carry and shoved it into a records box. Then I did the only smart thing I'd done all night. I called 911 from my personal phone. Not hospital security, not administration. Real police. And I stayed on the line. By sunrise, the basement was full of officers, state investigators, and people from departments I'd never heard of. The third floor was locked down. Administration kept saying there had been a misunderstanding, but there wasn't. Room 312 was empty when police got there. The patient was gone. No discharge, no transfer, no body, nothing. The woman in the red coat was never identified. Officially, the hospital later announced an internal investigation into unauthorized record-keeping and misconduct. A few administrators resigned. The basement wing was closed permanently. Jenna was never found. Neither was the man from 312. But 3 weeks later, I received an unmarked envelope at my apartment. Inside was a hospital ID card belonging to the missing security officer. And one note, in the same shaky handwriting I'd seen in Jenna's video log. "You remembered this time.